What does it mean? And how can we measure it? That's what we're going to be getting into today. Hope you're ready. Let's go. So your heart is the organ in the middle of your chest, and it beats all the time, whether you know it or not. In the hospitals, they measure it with this diagram. So this little up and down signal is the electrical activity of your heart. Every time it beats even, it has an up and down, which is symbolized by the electrical change in the heart. So each one of these is a beat. So bang, bang. And what they do is they put the total number of times your heart has beat in a minute together, and it gives you a number, which is the amount of times your heart has beat per minute. This is your heart rate. Depending on what activity you're doing will depend on how fast your heart is beating. In between each heartbeat, like what it says on the diagram, is a specific time. It's measured in seconds or milliseconds, depending on how fast your heart is beating. And this time changes all the way through that minute. So when you have a beats per minute, or you have your heart rate, that's actually an average. Within that minute, your heart rate could have changed a lot. Like this S, or this time, these seconds, they could have changed. But the average was this. So to explain this concept, I'm going to go over the next few slides, and hopefully it will make a lot more sense at the end. So imagine you're on holiday. Like this person, you're just chilling. Your heart is still beating. So your heart is beating a certain amount of times per minute. Can you see the time between each beat is actually not constant like it shows in this diagram, because stuff happens. Your thoughts can control your heart rate. So actually it looks something like this. Imagine your heart is beating constantly, and then you have a thought. This can be a good thought or it can be a bad thought. This will affect your heart rate. So as you can see here, your time has changed in between those beats. So it actually got shorter. When you have had this thought, your heart rate changed. The electrical status of your body changed. If we look at this athlete is running really fast. I don't know who she is. I think she's a 100-meter sprinter or something. So her heart rate is going something like this, because the body's under a lot of stress and it's exercising. It needs to get that blood around to all the muscles that are respiring. So her heart rate is going really fast. So if you look at her heart rate and the time in between each beat, it's actually going to be more constant than the person who's relaxing, because she's going at a high pace. Now, depending on how strenuous the exercise is will depend on, how fast the heart rate is actually going. So imagine this scenario. You're chilling at work. You're chilling at a nice 60 beats per minute. And then your boss comes in. Your boss starts shouting at you. You don't like your boss. This guy's annoying. So what's going to happen is his anger, you're going to receive that anger, and your heart rate is also going to change, because your nervous system is going to think you're coming under stress. So if you see, the time between each beat is getting reduced. Your heart rate is varying. It's changing. So in this moment where you went from the 60 beats per minute to 90 from your boss shouting, is very, very critical, because we can measure your HRV in these periods, how much your heart rate has changed from this 60 to this 90. So if you look at this graph, starting at 60, we're going to shoot up to 90. This is the same as the guy in the previous from the GIF. So it's changed from 60 to 90. How it went from there is not like this though. It's not a straight line. Is something like this. So because your heart rate is not trained very well, or your nervous system isn't trained or is not obedient, it won't know how serious this event is. So actually you'll have more of a chaotic rise. And this is very inefficient and is a waste of energy. So how does this relate to HRV? So HRV is how much your heart rate has varied in between two time slots. So it's important to realize your heart rate is not always constant and it varies. So we can use our Apple Watches to measure our HRV. Your Apple Watch is always measuring your HRV. So now we're going to go through and compare my HRV to someone I was working with. Okay, so if you look at the first column here, that is the lowest value for that day. Okay, so these are all values of the day. That's the lowest variation in that heart rate. That could have mean that your heart rate remained at 60, went to 61, 62. It was a small change. And then on the maximum change, these were much larger changes, maybe 2 or 3 times. So instead of going 60 to 61, maybe it went to 60 to 64 or 65. That is the difference between the upper and the lower range, how much your heart varied. Now you have to understand that your Apple Watch is not measuring all the time. It only measures through specific time frames. And if you click these, you can see show all data, and it will tell you actually what recordings it took at what time. So this is actually very specific to that time frame, because it would run out of battery if it was measuring your HRV all the time. If you compare these results to mine, I've also added the average of both. As you can see, my averages are a lot higher. That means during these recorded slots, okay, these windows that the Apple Watch was recording, my heart rate had a bigger change. What does that mean? That means I was doing some breathing exercises. That means I was doing a particular activity which shows my heart rate was able to change a lot. That means I had good control over my nervous system in these moments. Remember, this is not heart rate, this is how much your heart rate has varied within a particular time slot. So depending on what you're telling your Apple Watch that you're doing will depend on if it's taking a reading or not. Hopefully that makes sense. Anything you want me to clear up, please put it in the comments for the next video.